My name is Beth Harlan. I am an Associate Director at the Colley Career Education Center. I'm joined by Maddie Gregory, our Assistant Director of Professional Development for Georgetown College, and four wonderful panelists who you'll meet in a minute. For this presentation, I'll be moderating our panel, and Maddie will be manning the chat. Send questions her way at any time to Maddie Gregory there, either directed to a specific panelist or to the group, and she'll facilitate a Q&A about halfway through our time. So why are we here? Why does the gig economy, freelance work, why does it all matter right now? While some have thought of career trajectories as a bit of a ladder, today's career landscape is way more like a jungle gym than anything else. And yet, university career services, of which I am a part, well, we largely support students searching for full-time jobs, and we often overlook the rising incidence and importance of independent work in today's gig economy. The COVID crisis has given our center really an incredible opportunity to launch our own learning and to launch some programs related to short-term work. Most notably is our VIEW program, Virtual Immersions and Experiential Work, which has matched current and graduating students with short-term projects from over 100 alumni and other Georgetown connected folks. That program has been running for the past month, and it's been a tremendous success for students who otherwise maybe had an internship canceled or are still looking for opportunities upon graduating. Today, we want to highlight and really celebrate this work through a conversation with a remarkable group of young alumni. We'll ask them some questions, and you'll have a chance, as I said, to ask questions at the end of our time as well. And just invite our panelists to jump in with the first question, really just asking, what initially drew you to consider freelance work? Candace, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I can start. So I actually started my career in education and legal marketing. And while those were fulfilling career steps for me, especially starting out, getting the formal marketing education in legal marketing, because I didn't major in marketing, and then really working with the community through education, those job structures didn't really allow a lot of creative freedom. Like I didn't have the time or even the ability at work to take on other tasks or learn other skills or perform other functions. So I found myself always pursuing other opportunities, either during the summers or during the lighter seasons when I was working in legal marketing. And I just continued that. Through those efforts, I ended up building relationships that led to other relationships and other projects. And so I just kept going with freelance. Oh, you're actually muted, Beth.
Of course I am. Thank you so much. Caroline, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I, after graduating, worked full-time for a startup in DC, and I was there for about 1.5 years, and I started doing freelance overlapping with that and realized just how many opportunities were out there. Startup world is wild. It's so fast-paced, and I got to learn and touch lots of different sorts of projects, and it was a huge opportunity for acquiring a lot of skills in a short period of time. And I think it was great preparation for being able to jump out and do my own thing. Because I'm sure, as our other panelists will tell you over the course of this conversation, so much of being successful as a freelancer is having first a set of hard skills that you can market originally, and then as you build more and more relationships, projects follow that. But you need to have that hard skill set first. And so I think that my startup experience was like perfect for developing that. And then what really drew me to the idea of freelancing full time is the flexibility. Being able to live where I want to live, set my own hours, have, especially after startup experience, a work-life balance was all really appealing. And I think that, especially being relatively young, I did 1.5 years full time and then launched my own projects and started doing my own thing and looking for my own work. Going that path pretty early out of college feels somewhat unusual, especially when people are using freelance as a way to build an independent business rather than looking for long-term work. So I really like it, though. I originally was planning on doing it as something to fill the gaps between leaving my full-time job and going to grad school. But the longer I've been doing it, the more and more I see it as a real career path with a lot of opportunities for growth. And as I have shifted my mindset to think of it as a real business, the opportunities follow. And just like any other career opportunity, it's like such a, I think it even more strongly shows how if you take yourself seriously and like really communicate the things that you want and form the relationships along the way, that things happen for you. I mean, it's like a little like incubator of all the things that we're told all throughout college that you need to do to be successful in work.
Thank you so much. Sarah, you want to jump in? What
Yeah.
initially drew you to consider this?
Absolutely. So much of what Candace and Caroline have both said was true for me as well. And I think the startup, coming from a startup, especially because, you know, one of the experiences I had at being at an early stage startup was we worked with so many freelancers. There were more freelancers on my team than full-time people. And it was funny to be in that position where, you know, I loved the mission of the organizations I was with, but you know, realizing that so many of the things that I felt constraining about my position weren't constraining the freelancers we were working with. And so yeah, that was kind of maybe the first thing that, because I had always heard that just like freelancing, it's not secure, it's not stable, you'll hate it, it'll burn you out, like it's just not a good option. You know, it's a good in-between gig thing, but it's not something to think about for maybe the rest of your life. And then working with those freelancers at my startup, I think kind of changed my perception around that. And then when I made the leap and went into journalism instead, I got to a point where basically I realized that doing the kind of reporting I wanted to do was just not something that anyone is really, which basically like longer form, enterprise, investigative, you know, the number of staff jobs available for that, especially in a really niche area like agriculture, rural issues, is like, I could count on one hand in America. And so just realizing that that doesn't mean I can't, you know, I have to spend 25 years working into one of those positions. It just means there's other people reporting on those issues. They just do it as freelancers. And realizing that that was maybe the only way to really do it was definitely a big motivator, but also knowing that while you're a freelancer, you have the opportunity to do lots of other things. You know, people don't, there's a lot fewer constraints than in any other type of kind of full-time work. So all of those things, plus flexibility, plus being able to live where you want, being able to, you know, to the relationships thing, there's so many people that I've met and that I care a lot about, especially in the industries that I work in, who, you know, you meet them and you spend time with them and you're like, oh, I would love to work with you at some point in my career. And freelancing is a great way to do it because people can hire freelancers for 6 months. Finding an open staff position is way harder. So yeah, being able to work with all these people I've always wanted to work with, being able to do all these like various things, all big motivators for taking the leap.
That's great. Thank you so much. And Maite, just having graduated in May, help us understand what initially drew you to this kind of work too.
Yeah, I think for me, just the scare of COVID and being a like recent grad in, you know, like during these times really scared me. And I thought like I had spent a lot of my senior year looking for online for full-time opportunities. And, you know, like that seems like the only path that anyone talks about. So looking for full-time opportunities and trying to decide like what it was that I wanted to do, and just not getting to like one specific answer. So I think for me, what led me to do freelancing was just being indecisive and needing different opportunities. And that came from just reaching out to like the Georgetown network and all the networks that I had to see and really market myself as like, I'm not looking for a full-time position, just like any type of like freelance. These are the hard skills, kind of like what Caroline was saying, like these are the hard skills that I have. Do you need help on any of your projects or do you know anyone? And that's when I started to see a lot more results and opportunities open up than when I was asking people to connect me for full-time roles, when there was just so much uncertainty and like people were getting their offers rescinded. It just didn't seem like the time to be asking for a full-time role.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, everybody, for sharing some of this. I'm curious, maybe what has been a really big surprise for you, thinking back to what you were thinking or feeling or wanting when you started this journey of freelancing, and now where you are. What's been surprising? Anybody jump in?
Yeah, I can jump in on that because I have a top of mind one. I think if you had asked me what my biggest fear was as someone who was starting freelancing last October, I would have said that there's going to be a recession in the next 6 months. Because nothing eats into, whatever maybe cushion you've saved up or whatever your plan is, your strategy for being able to survive and pay rent and buy food while you're a freelancer, like economic uncertainty. And then COVID happened, and here we are in a recession. And the thing is, I am not having a hard time finding jobs. I expected everything to kind of dry up and that people were everyone was gonna fire me and say like, sorry, we don't have money for freelancers anymore. But what I was surprised to find that actually what happened is everyone is on a hiring freeze, but they're still expected to finish all their projects. So there's actually more freelance work than ever, kind of to other points that have been made. People need to bring people on. They need temporary help. They have small projects that they need to execute on, and they don't have the freedom to hire someone full time. So yeah, being a freelancer with skill that can come in, help someone out, help them reach a goal, and then just say thanks, like look me up next time you're interested again, is I expected this recession to be like the end of the world and my biggest regret in my career and be the ultimate sign that I have failed as a freelancer, but actually it turned out the opposite of what I thought it would be.
I think to add on to that, I am mostly surprised that it works. I initially started freelancing part-time, and then due to COVID and a grant that I was on at PBS Kids, due to those things happening simultaneously, I really pivoted fully into the freelance clients that I had and freelancing overall. And I went in, I think the first month I was like, this is going to be a temporary thing. I'm going to keep searching. And then it just became my life. Like the work became, work that I was interested in and mission aligned and really passionate about. And the opportunities were able to sustain me, and I'm thriving with them. And that has been the most surprising. And it's really forced me to think about it as a long-term career option and not just the thing that I do in the background of other opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, to echo what others have said, I think the thing that scared me the most was whether or not I would be financially stable, for sure. But what I was shocked to discover is that because it's shorter term contracts and because there is some uncertainty associated with it, you can charge a much higher hourly rate as a freelancer than you would ever have as a full-time employee. And if you're able to find enough work to fill your time, you can actually make substantially more than the level that you would be at in a full-time position. I mean, right now I make close to 3 times as much as I was making at my startup. And that's an instant shift, and you do kind of have to swallow the uncertainty, like learn to live with the stress, learn to like save your money and plan for the day when maybe the work isn't there. Like there is a mental toll. But ultimately, especially for being at this stage of my career and my life, I feel so lucky that I found this career path and am able to build up the sort of financial security that I am. It's not something that I would have ever envisioned for myself, and certainly not something that I anticipated happening in like the uncertainty of freelance. When in reality, it's much more stable, I think, financially than what I was doing before.
I think something that's been really surprising for me is how like the amount of responsibility that I'm given, like as a freelancer. I'm in charge of like the projects that I lead. And in a way I'm like the subject like expertise, and that's why they're hiring me. And I think that that's not something that really clicked in the beginning. And even now as I'm working at a startup, and just the different roles that I get to play is outstanding and amazing. I feel like every day it's something new. And I think I realized that that's, if I was in one department in a company, I wouldn't have a lot of opportunities to branch out into other departments and learn different skills. And just in this like month and a half alone, I feel like I've been able to cross over so much. And that's something that I think I definitely underestimated in freelance work.
This is great. Some of the things you all are bringing up, centering work around some of the aspects of our current moment with COVID and some of the other pieces going on right now, as well as setting your rates, Caroline. This idea of balancing the tension between wanting to get work, but also wanting to value your time and your skills as a freelancer. So let's start with the COVID piece, and then certainly we'll move into kind of how you all have approached business development and valuing the awesome work you're doing. Any other thoughts on just how the current COVID space we're in has shifted your work? It sounds like in a lot of ways there are more opportunities because of hiring freezes.
Much of my work was already digital and virtual, but I think that now untraditional companies or companies that really didn't prioritize their digital presence, they're thinking more strategically about it and really wanting to ramp it up. And so it's again, as so many on the panel have touched on, like it's just made it kind of like a feast in terms of the amount of opportunities and the different types of things you can do and take on in this space as we all adjust to the new world and our new normal.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I feel like something that I've seen even in the companies that I'm working for is they're pivoting so much. So just like having some knowledge like about technology, about Zoom, like that I use so much for classes, and then being able to bring that into the workforce, just things like that are now highly valued, or like social media, like how to put like these things that I think that our generation like knows how to do really well, that are now in high demand due to COVID, due to everything being virtual. And that's something that I think has like just changed. And even, for example, one of the companies that I work for, they do in-person conference, and now it's going to be virtual. So now helping lead that transition, and a lot of companies are doing that for their in-person events.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. It's almost like the two topics I just brought up, the COVID crisis and this idea of really valuing your skills and your time, are in some ways connected, because COVID has elucidated this idea that some of the things maybe you thought weren't even that special or that valuable now really are so much in focus for a variety of employers. I want to expand our discussion about the current moment and just create space for anyone to reflect on the current and hundreds of years old crisis of racial injustice. How does that affect your work?
I think for me, I'm noticing, so sorry, just to back up a little bit. I work in social media and digital marketing, and when I started out, the main strategy was spray and pray. So like companies would just put out a ton of content, that would put out links, and then it was a free for all. And if you clicked on the link, then they got their view for the day, and it drove revenue, and it drove, the social media presence. And then that shifted to building engagement. So getting people to talk to each other and talk to the brand and be organic ambassadors for the brand on social media. What I've noticed and what I think is so essential about this moment right now is that everyone from in every level of business, from influencers to huge corporations, they are returning to the service. So how is what we produce in service of others? And so it's gone from engagement to making yourself functional and listening and just being responsive. What can I do? If I make shoes, how can my shoe company be supportive of this moment? And I think that has been an inspiring shift, even though for me, it's these are tough times. It's tough to manage. It's tough to live through. But that piece has just been so inspiring that I don't have to work with a company that's just like, we need views. Now it's like, okay, like we need views, but we also want to make sure that what people are looking at is making their lives better. And that's just been such a refreshing and welcome change as a content creator and a content strategist.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Something that I've noticed over, definitely shifting now, but over the last couple of years of doing content production, it feels like so many companies that I work with are very aware that they need to have diverse representation in their video and photo assets, but there's not actually diverse representation in the creation of the content itself. That it's like we use these people, we use people of color, we use queer people like as a way to try to communicate that it's inclusive content, but the actual content itself doesn't reflect those experiences. And I think that companies now, the ones that I'm working with, are starting to recognize how disingenuous that is and how little it actually serves the people that they're trying to have this content go out to. So I'm hopeful that this will be a turning point where there's more centering of marginalized voices in the actual like production of materials, and that when you're doing the research to come up with stuff that we're going out to people and having more diverse voices, not just like putting people up in a video and being like, ah, yes, it's diversity. So it's like, I think it's a truer way of engaging that we're starting to see now, and certainly more awareness. And I think that we've reached a point where companies can't really hide behind this idea that they don't know any better. So that's all, it's like, it feels like a tipping point, certainly. And in the conversations I'm having, even with people who are much older, it feels like people are getting it now in a way that it didn't feel like before.
It sounds like in some ways, I work with so many students who so want to engage social justice and equity issues in their work, and they understandably imagine that their job title needs to have those words in it. And yet what I hear both of you saying is, man, there are so many ways, no matter what skill set you have, to really get in there and move things forward. That's great. Anyone else want to jump in on this subject?
Yeah, I would say, and as someone who's doing like the content creation and like social media strategy, I feel like I've been able to really like push the companies that I work for, and when we are working together to produce the content, to actually be intentional about like what we're posting and like substantive. And I think that that's something that I noticed, like, wait, like making those comments and saying like, I can't just simply post about it. For example, like Juneteenth, I'm not just gonna, there needs to be more behind it. And I think that's in a way being able to advocate and push companies to do more, because you're kind of the one that is advising them on how to create their content. And I feel like, yes, like definitely not needing the title. And I've seen different opportunities for me to suggest things like, well, are we doing this because we really care about it, or just to do it? And if so, then we should reflect on that. And I think that for me, and being like a recent grad, and I feel like I have to be push myself to be very confident about that advice that I give, but doing it because I think that it's important and people are going to be receptive to it, but it's definitely something worth doing, and that we have like the ability to do.
Yeah, so much of everything you guys just said resonates with me. I think, one of the things that was one of the thousands of things in my pros and cons list that was on the pro side was that getting to do freelance actually created availability for me to work for people who otherwise, like, frankly, could not afford to pay me to work for them. Agriculture is, I would guess, maybe the least diverse industry in America, up there for sure. And, finding a way to, get more Black, Indigenous, people of color into the industry and helping them become farmers is something that I really care about, and I think everyone should really care about. But, you know, and I know there's so much need for just expertise, for just someone to kind of walk with them through this industry that's so hostile to farmers of color in so many ways, and wanting to, you know, having the skills to be able to do that, to just be able to be an ambassador, to go and, you know, whether it's going with a farmer to their local, you know, USDA office and sitting there with them to make sure they get treated like everyone else, or, you know, giving them advice, connecting them with resources, like, you know, having been in this industry for most of my life after growing up on a farm, like I knew that I was this incredible resource, but I was like, I can't just go and make $15 an hour and still have the life that I have now. So, you know, freelancing made it so that basically on the back end, I can rearrange and say, you know, to Carolyn's point, I can charge a foundation enough money to subsidize my work for Black farmers. And I can find ways to, you know, give hours to people who it can be really, really impactful for, but maybe right now don't have the resources to pay for it. And having the freedom to be able to pursue some of that work that feels really impactful and really important, and not having to do it just like on Saturday mornings when you're exhausted and you've already done your whole week of work and you feel kind of begrudging about it because you're like, oh, this is my free time and I've worked so hard and I don't really want to go volunteer. You know, finding a way to say, no, this is paid work. I'm working hard for my client, and this is, and I'm finding a way to, freelancing gave me the opportunity to find a way to work those people into my group of clients. And it feels like something that I would have never been able to do in any kind of full-time work. And yeah, it feels like a way to not just in this moment be about it, but to be about it all the time.
I'm imagining everyone is feeling pretty inspired right now to all go out and do some of the work that resonates with what you all are saying. So let's talk about some of the nuts and bolts of that. I'll first maybe walk us through, or have you all walk us through what it looks like to manage your time. How do you organize your time as you're balancing multiple projects or projects with a day job? You know, what are some of the practices that are really useful there? And then, yeah, we'll talk some about fee structure and whatnot after that. But help us know how you map it all out.
I didn't know if Caroline wanted.
Oh yeah, I didn't know if you were going to speak after.
Go ahead.
Well, for me, it's certainly like an always evolving process, and it depends a lot on the different clients that I have. So I have clients on the West Coast and the East Coast, and I split my time between Chicago and Washington, D.C. So if I'm on Central Time, I really have to be available from 9 a.m. Eastern Time, so that's like 8 a.m. my time, all the way through 7 p.m. my time, which is 5 p.m. Pacific Time. So it's like this great spread. So I feel like I'm like on for long days, but I certainly like take breaks during the day. Talking about like the flexibility of freelance, it's like if I want to meet a friend for coffee at 3 p.m. I can. If I want to like cook myself a nice lunch, I can. And I have the flexibility to do that. So it's not like I'm working an 11-hour day every day. Certainly I've noticed that I am so much more productive and more organized on days that I have meetings with clients. And so I used to sometimes try to like bundle up my kind of almost like in college where you would like put all your classes together in a couple days and be like, oh, well, I'll just have like 2 days where I can just like grind out my projects. And that worked so well for me in college, but I'm realizing it doesn't work for me as well in freelance life, that I like having a few meetings every day. It like keeps me energized, especially right now during COVID times where there's like no one else to see or talk to. It like helps keeps my energy up. Helps me feel like I'm staying accountable to my clients when I know that I'm going to have to like show work or discuss something. It usually gets me more excited to do the work. Like I find that if I'm not inherently excited about a project, that building the relationship with the client is sometimes enough for me to feel invested. But I need to keep going back and having that touchstone with them to keep my investment feeling high. But yeah, it's certainly harder, I think, to stay on track and like time-wise than with a full-time job, just because there's no one looking over your shoulder. Like yeah, you're accountable to your clients, but ultimately you're your own boss. And it can be really easy sometimes to slip into getting distracted by other things, or if you have a day where you're working on a lot of different projects at once, just like trying to like switch mentally between being like fully in one thing and then in another thing can take up a lot of time. And it's the sort of thing where you learn by doing also. I mean, like if you try to do this, it might feel really rocky and difficult for the first several months. You'll start to hit a groove and you'll figure out what works for you. And I would say that it's probably not honestly dissimilar to what everyone is figuring out during COVID times right now. That the sort of things that you're doing working from home with a full-time job is not that dissimilar to freelance. So if you figured it out now for yourself, it's probably not going to be too hard of a transition to doing what we all do.
To piggyback on Caroline's point about trying different things and learning different things, I'm going to just confess something to you all. I am a classic creative, just lots of ideas all over the place, interested in everything, overcommitting. But one thing that helps me pull it all together so that I can be productive and effective and really do things that are meaningful in a meaningful way is the 1-3-5 rule. And so that is, if you haven't heard of it, it's a productivity hack, but it's focusing on completing one huge thing per day, 3 medium things, and 5 small things. And that just thinking about my different clients in that way, and thinking about my maintenance activities, like things that keep me sustained, thinking about those things in that way, it helps me to prioritize and make sure that I'm not creating client reports for 3 different clients in one day, but maybe it's just one client report, and then it's checking email or managing my calendar, and then, cleaning the house and updating my computer, like those types of things that take time, but really make you a fully functioning, independent freelancer. And then one thing I had to learn also was that I work best when I can dedicate my attention to one single thing at one time. And so I began day blocking. So now I have 3 clients right now, and they all have dedicated days. So it really helps me like front load one client into earlier in the week, and then block off time where I'm just focusing on the task related to another client. And that just works for me. But as Caroline said, like try different things, monitor yourself, figure out like what's working, and don't be afraid to pivot. And if you need to pivot, I am a fan of Google. I'm a fan of Medium. I'm a fan of Reddit. I'm also a fan of talking to other people that are just good at what they do, whether it's full-time or a gig or other, and just finding out different ways of thinking about work. And then lastly, I think that's like the greatest thing about this awful time that we're in is that everyone is rethinking the meaning of work and what work should look like and what it means. And that is just a great opportunity for you to think about that for yourself as well.
Yeah, I will hop in. I think, certainly a very quickly evolving thing that has evolved in a lot of different ways. I am a journalist in my heart of hearts, so I'm all about deadlines. I don't ever let a client assign me anything that doesn't have a deadline, that doesn't have like, even if they're like, we're gonna 6 months project, here it is, it's long, we'll just work it out as it goes. It's like, no. This date, I'm gonna give you this, and then it will like chunk it out. And it's like, it's fine if they don't really care about deadlines. I care about deadlines, so I will enforce them on myself. And that's what I need to get things done, because if there's no deadlines, I won't do it. And that's just who I am. So leaning into just like knowing how you work and not trying to make, a system that doesn't work for you try and work. I've done sprint planning where I have tried to like, having many clients at the same time, just like put things in a spreadsheet and assigning a point to each like 15-minute chunk, and then making sure I don't overcommit to the time I want to spend in a week. I've tried stuff like that, which works sometimes. And then sometimes I just give up on doing it midway through the week, and I'm just like, I'll get it done and I'll hit my deadlines, and everything else is fine if I don't get it done. Google Calendar or some kind of calendar app is something to live by. Organizing the time is just, I also have been trying to lean into just leaning into my, like, this sounds odd to say, I'm going to say my natural cycles. And I mean like my natural work cycles, which is, I'm the kind of person who I like projects that ramp. And so I get excited about something. At the beginning, it's hard for me to be engaged in it because it's new and I don't really know what it is and I'm not familiar with the people involved. And as it goes, I get more and more excited and I'm more excited to put more hours in. So I try to set projects up like that. Usually clients are amenable in some way, but then it's also important to be mindful that at the end of a ramp, I need a break. And it's hard when you're a freelancer to take a break because you feel like you've made commitments and you can't let up. You have to start looking for your next clients. You have to get on your next projects because what if, to what Carolyn said earlier, what if those jobs dry up and then what are you going to do? And there's certainly like some mental stuff to take on there. But yeah, trying to get to a place where I understand what the natural way that I work and trying to match a schedule to that as best I can. And, every time I've needed to take a day or a week or just like downshifted for a little while. And I feel like it's the end of the world. And I draft emails to my clients that it's just like, hey, I'm going to, I usually do 20 hours for you. I'm going to do 10 this week. And I feel like they're going to fire me and hate me and it's going to be the end of the world. And then people are literally always just like, yeah, it's fine. That's fine. Whatever. So yeah, for me, it's been all about finding kind of my natural workflow and then trying to build a schedule around that as best I can. Obviously stuff comes up and you throw your schedule out the window and you just get stuff done when you need to. But overall, it's about trying to not burn out.
Just really quick, I want to add something to the natural work cycles idea, which is that certainly in college, I learned for myself that like if I'm trying to write a paper, if I'm in the mood to write a paper, I can do it in like 3 hours. If I'm not in the mood, I can spend all day struggling with it. And a lot of the beauty of the flexibility of freelance is that I can wait until I'm like in the right headspace to tackle the right kind of project often. And I can be a lot more effective with my time than I was in an office job. And sometimes that means that I'm working at like midnight and that's okay. But it's all about like being really in tune with yourself and trusting that you're going to get it done.
Well, and not apologizing for the way you work best either. I mean, I think that's something implicit in what everyone's saying. I work with a lot of students at Georgetown who are embarrassed by the fact that they procrastinate. And, it's like, maybe you're pressure prompted. Maybe that deadline or that little bit of push there at the end is really invigorating. It's fine. Go with it, right? No need to apologize. Maite, how about you? What's helped you stay on top of things? Is that different than what helped you as a student or the same?
A couple of things came up as everyone was sharing. So first, like not apologizing. Beth, I think that's so important. That's something that I'm realizing that I think because I'm for some of the projects that I'm working on, it's like on an hourly basis. So, or getting paid by the hour. So then I start to stress out and think like, oh my gosh, I don't want them to know that this took me 5 hours instead of 3. And I think like that's something that I've had to just get comfortable with saying like, no, this took me 5 hours. My boss just might not know that this takes more time than it needs to. And being very open about that. And I think kind of like what Sarah said, I thought like they're going to be like, you work too slow. We don't want you to work for us anymore. And that's definitely not the case. And I think something along those lines is like setting boundaries and expectations in the very beginning is so helpful. I'm kind of learning as I go in order to do that with really understanding like, when do you want me to get this done? And is that flexible? And just conversations like that being very, like, again, you're kind of your own boss, but also having to check in with your client is really important. Just because I think I'm still on the like student professor mentality where it's like, oh, I'm turning in this assignment to you. So I need like a hard deadline that I know you want it by. And if you get to set your own deadlines, then doing a very like well thought out analysis of like how much time you're going to need, because I think that for me, I'm like, okay, well, I'll really try to get it done tomorrow because I'm sure they want it tomorrow. And then I'm stressed out, like staying up super late to try to get it done when they're like, oh yeah, no, we could have gotten that on like in 3 days. So, realizing that you're like a professional now and you have more autonomy over your work, I think is something to really acknowledge from the very beginning. just to make it like a lot easier on yourself, I think I'm still like on the Georgetown mentality that's like the pressure's on and high perform, and it's, I think that now I'm starting to realize like I can take it down a notch and trust in the process and like my ability to get my work done.
And claim the power and autonomy you have to say what's reasonable and go from there. This is great. I'm connecting with Maddie a little bit, and some other questions we're getting are around the business development piece. So walk us through how determining your fee structure has worked. What are the processes or the resources or conversations with people? What things were helpful to you as you were figuring out how to charge? What advice would you share with somebody who's thinking about how to value their stuff?
Mm-hmm. My number one piece of advice is don't underestimate what you're worth, especially when you're young. Just because you're young doesn't mean that you should be making $15, $20 an hour. And that as you're having conversations with potential clients and they ask for a number, like always give a larger number than you think they want, and they'll negotiate you down. And oftentimes I've had clients where I give a bigger number than I think they're going to accept, and they're just like, hey, okay. And then, that's an amazing feeling. And then you start to get a benchmark of like what you are really worth and what is competitive. It's definitely worth asking other people who are in your industry. I think that especially among, it's like such a big deal for women to be really transparent with each other about what they're making too, since we still tend to be underpaid. And there's so much power in knowing what the market standard is. The way that I figured it out is I figured what a full-time person who does the sort of consulting work that I do, what they're making, and I went for a 30 to 40% discount on what the company would be charging. So not what that person is like taking home, but like, so like, let's say a company charges like $300 or $400 an hour if they're like sending out a consultant. That consultant is maybe only making like $90 or $80 an hour as their take-home pay, and the company is pocketing the rest. That's how those consulting companies get so rich. I, as an individual, could charge half of what the company is charging, and it's still going to be saving client money on the other side. So that's kind of like the beauty of working for yourself, is you get to take all of that and reinvest it in yourself and your business and your own development. As some of the others have said too, there can definitely be a range. Like don't feel like your rate has to be the same for every client. I have clients who I charge half of what I charge other clients, and you kind of know what a client is willing to pay, and you know how strongly you feel about a project, and you can also know what the competition is. If you're the only person who can do this job, you can charge a lot more. If it's a rush job and they want a lot of hours in a short period of time, you can charge a lot more. So like be thinking of all those things, and when you share the numbers that you want, like actually just share the number that would make you genuinely happy. Like what is the number that you would be delighted to do this work for, and start with that, and then you can negotiate from there. And if that's really out of range for the client, they'll let you know. But what I have found is that like people are really willing to pay what you say you want to pay. And also I think that when you start with a higher hourly rate too, it also like helps solidify that feeling of expertise, that people are very respectful of your time. It gives you so much more power when you're saying, I'm going to take this time for myself, or I will get this to you at this time. And as you start to have other clients too, and clients know that you have other clients, you have a lot more bargaining power as well. So those are all lots of ways to like, it like kind of starts with your hourly rate, but it's also how you think about yourself. Like if you think that you are a great asset to the people employing you, they will treat you like you are one.
Yeah, so many yeses to so many things that you just said. I would say because just to not repeat all of that great advice, I would say on the other end, when you're trying to figure out how, for me, it's always newspapers, magazines who are trying to charge you, pay you $0 for your work, how low you can go. I think you have to start with like understanding what your monthly expenses are as an individual, and like what the absolute minimum you can make and pay your rent and buy food, and do the things that you need to do as an individual. I mean, I think also, especially when people first start freelancing, I certainly had this scary moment. Tax is not taken out, or Social Security, that kind of stuff is not taken out of payments you get. So like when you say $70 an hour, you're really saying for your take home pay like $55 an hour. Mm-hmm. So just knowing that like sometimes you quote an amount that seems higher than you need it to be, but realistically, like you have expenses, you pay for your home office, you pay for the technology you use, you're bringing a lot to the relationship, even if you're just one person who's like doing strategy or some kind of consulting like that. And then, I mean, I would say to kind of another anecdote to what Carolyn was saying, I've had clients come with projects for me that I just didn't really want to do. And rather than say no, I just gave them an insane figure that I thought for sure they'd say no to. And then they say yes. And then you have to do it. But it's like, wow, and you only get, those are the moments that you're like, oh, like this skill that I've really been underselling is actually huge. So there's like, it's definitely something like when you're trying to work with foundations or individuals or small businesses, like it's hard to say, it's hard to know that like, people pay me $150 an hour and you can only afford 20, that's tough. But if you know what you need to make in a month, if you know what you need to make to meet your goals, or, put as much in savings or to pay for conferences and professional development that you need to keep growing as a person, then you can say, as long as I have enough of these big projects, I can do some of this work that I'm more passionate about, or that is, I think will be more impactful, but, it doesn't pay as well. But you can also be very intentional about like, okay, I can work for that and I can give them this many hours and still reach my other goals. And I can say no to some of these higher paying jobs, even though they pay well, because I want to have some of this intentional work as well. And I want to mix, and I want to find a balance. And I mean, knowing yourself what is the least you can charge, and then also knowing your clients, right? Knowing that like if you're a nonprofit or like a family foundation who represents $1 billion family, like maybe don't give them the cheap nonprofit rate, because that's not quite the same as working for a local charity or someone. So for me, the most important thing is just knowing that monthly rate and knowing how much I'm going to make in a month with what I have so far. And then you kind of take each new client or each new proposal or each new project as part of, do I need it to hit my goal? Do I need it to, or can I be flexible with this quantity and consider this work subsidized?
Just to add to Sarah's point about, thinking of ways that, or what you should be thinking about if you choose projects that you're passionate about, but they can't pay your standard rate or the rate that would help you meet your financial goals. I think that, and this gets tricky, like working for free or working at a lower rate, that gets to be a slippery slope. But what I would say is that when someone cannot pay you, please examine the opportunity and examine the association or the organization that is funding the opportunity, and figure out, is there something that they can do that would advance your career as a freelancer or round out your portfolio? So let's say for me specifically, one of the organizations I was working with, they couldn't pay me, but I knew that I wanted to enter somewhat of an influencer space, and I needed kind of like validating moments. So in turn, I asked them, I would like to do speaking opportunities and speaking engagements. For another client, they could not pay my standard rate and the rate that would help me meet my own goals. And I asked them if I could host programming with them, and that would make up that would also expose me to a new audience, but it will also make up some of the money that they can't pay me. It's a revenue generating opportunity. And it was a win-win, because what I was proposing, the events that I was proposing to them, also enhanced their content strategy and their reach with their community as well. So just being strategic about when you adjust, just asking strategic questions and being strategic about why you're adjusting and how you are adjusting. I started freelancing in a different industry where it was less taboo and more common to work for free. And I think that now you guys are luckily and fortunately in a completely different space, but I do want to state that all of the free opportunities that I've ever taken on have, first of all, they started in my first 2 years of working, and they have to this day, like I'm 30, I've been working for like 10 years now, like professionally. The impact is just so deep, and the money that, like, I've made that money like 40 times over at this point. And I've really built a brand and a network of people just through those early free opportunities. And there weren't many. So just being strategic about it. If you do adjust, be very strategic.
Yeah, I think I would add on, and just, I guess this connects a little bit more to like considering freelancing and like the opportunities. For me, like as a recent grad, just realizing that I am kind of like taking a, like working minimum wage or not setting my price like as high. I've realized that like the spaces that I entered are giving me access to a large, wide network that I would have not known about, or, you know, been in contact with like sponsors or CEOs of companies. And this access that I think is going to be so valuable later on. And also just, so I think like that's also kind of going to what Candace was saying, is that thinking about like long term, and maybe even taking on like opportunities in fields that you might have an interest in, and see how it builds from there. And also just going back to like the pay thing, would be reassessing and like your value in the work that you're doing, because something that I've realized is because the role wasn't clearly defined in the beginning, and it is like a startup culture, more gets added on, and even like a month in, and like sharing with people like what I do, they tell me like, Maita, that seems like it's 3 roles that you're doing. Like, are you getting paid for those 3 roles that you're doing, or just the one that you started with? And I think that as a recent grad and like as a woman, it is like hard to be vocal about those things, and it's really stepping away from like, well, I'm just so grateful to have this opportunity, and I know it's like these are hard times, to really thinking like, but this is the time, and like the work that they're getting is a lot more valuable than like what we had thought about in the beginning. And I think that's also just like a personal assessment of realizing like, wait, I can do this, like this high quality work, or I can take on like different roles in other situations, like also looking into the future.
Yeah, if the work wasn't valuable to them, you wouldn't be there in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm aware of time. We did have 2 quick questions coming in, and so I'll kind of read them both off and maybe ask you to pick one and answer whichever one you want. So yeah, first question is, how can I get started? Second question is, what do you see your future in freelance work being? From what you've all said, it seems like the work is very in the moment. How do you plan for your future goals and aspirations with work that can be unstable and fluid? So pick a question, and we'll wrap up with those.
Freelancing is your opportunity to do what you want, do what you care about, do what you're passionate about, do what you otherwise couldn't do in a full-time job. I started by following people on Instagram and figuring out what they were doing. That was how I got my first freelance gig. I saw someone and said, what are you doing? How can I help? And then that ended up building a unique skill.
Yeah, I'll just chime in quick. 1 sentence responses to maybe both of those. 1, the people you know, reach out to everyone you've ever met and everyone you know, and connect with people on LinkedIn and just say, here's what I like to do. Do you have any opportunities where I can do that? I'm happy to be a freelancer. I'm happy to do it part-time or whatever. I have gotten almost all my clients just like because people know I'm a freelancer. So once you start putting it out there, stuff will come in. And then kind of the long term, I think this has actually been one of the more challenging parts of freelancing for me, because yeah, when you're at a company or an organization, there tends to be kind of some strategies around growth and development, and how your skills will build and positions you'll move into. And that's going to kind of be on you as a freelancer to decide where you want to go. And you have a lot more freedom and liberty to kind of tie different skills together. But yeah, it takes intentionality. It takes setting aside hours in your week to think about it and plan and be your own advocate. So yeah, it's not easy, but it is, yeah, it's exciting and it's cool. And it means you can carve paths that no one has ever been on before because you're not in an organization that decided how you're going to grow.
I would say definitely like plan, at least for me, and who knows now with like all these opportunities, if I might like continue in freelance, but I kind of took it as like a response to like COVID and to like the uncertainty. So I think that if that's the reason why you're doing it, like really be thinking about like where you want to be in like a year or 2 years or whatever. Like if you have a goal and know that this isn't kind of like your like the career that you're pursuing, then I think like establishing that in the beginning can be super helpful in terms of like looking for the types of like gigs and freelance work that you do. And even for like the startup that I'm working for, my boss is like, so where do you want to be in like 5 years so I can assign you the work that will be like that will help you get where you want to go. So I think like that is just so important in the beginning. Also I feel like I would avoid it after I graduated, but yet everyone still asks me like what I want to do. So having a little bit of an idea to help guide you is so helpful, because something that I realized in just like in this short amount of time is that people want to help you. So having an answer and like making it easier for people to help you, to guide, to send other freelance work your way that is relevant to the career field that you're pursuing is just helpful to establish from the very beginning. And I do want to I see that like the email's up. So my net ID is MA1710.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Yeah.
No worries.
Okay, everything else looked good. That last minute Zoom panel, fun and excitement. Okay, well, I'm going to stop sharing the screen just so that I can look at you all again and say thank you so much for the insights you've shared. I am so excited to upload this file and get some quotes that we can be putting out really for the rest of the year with students. As I said in the beginning, this is, despite the fact that universities rely quite a bit on freelancers to teach classes and engage in so many ways, universities have not been great at preparing students to enter these spaces. And so your all's wisdom is going to be critical for us as the world continues to change quickly. And we need to change in the way we support students.